Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, so are the blue-collar trades the track to a secure future? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. So is college the answer to a secure future, or could it be the professional trades? Today, Wall Street Journal best-selling author Ken Rusk is here to talk about his book, Blue Collar Cash, Love Your Work, Secure Your Future, and Find Happiness for Life. Ken, welcome to Prudent Money.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you having me.
You know, Ken, I was having this conversation with my 17-year-old son last night about college. And my oldest, this isn't our first go-around. My oldest is in school right now. And I found myself more interested in him going to college than he was wanting to go to college. There was no excitement in his voice. It was almost as if this was exactly just, the required next step. Then I thought about the money, the enormous amount of investment into a 4-year college. Then I immediately thought about how upside down the world is today. Then for the first time, I questioned, was it really worth it? And that's what you address in the book from the standpoint of college versus kind of thinking out of the box. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, first off, if you just take a look at the numbers, there's roughly 167 million people considered to be full employment in the United States today. And about 77 million of those people do something with their hands. In other words, they're involved in some type of a trade or a skill or some type of activity like that. So just by the sheer numbers alone, a balanced economy requires that about 40% of us have some type of a trade or a skill that we can do to keep the infrastructure and everything else going in our world. I'm not an anti-college guy at all. If you're going to go to school because you want to be a surgeon or you want to operate on my shoulders so I can get back on the golf course, I'm going to want you to know everything there is to know about surgery before you pick up a knife. If you want to be a teacher or someone who manages money or an engineer, yeah, you need to do that. But if you're going to college only because someone says you have to or you should, there's a whole lot of reason. If you don't have a specific reason to go, there's a whole lot of reason to think about a blue-collar field.
Well, your book, Blue Collar Cash, addresses the problems with college talk a little bit about the statistics say about the future of the college grad. Well,
it's funny because right now, college kids with a 4-year degree, they expect to make $70,000 plus coming out of college. Right now, the average is $50,000. So they're already $20,000 in the hole based on their expectations. Now, if you take a look at a typical college, let's say it's $40,000 a year all in with travel and everything, gas, meals, the whole scenario. You're talking about $160,000 to $200,000 for a college education. Well, you could go out right now and become an apprentice, plumber, carpenter, electrician, whatever, and make $50,000 a year on the plus side. So, God forbid you borrowed that money to go to school. You're talking about a $320,000 to $400,000 swing in a young person's asset base by the time they're 23 years of age. And all I'm saying is, you at least you need to think about that before you automatically take that college path.
Now, when you mentioned blue collar, where did that phrase even come from?
That's a really interesting question. Years and years and years ago, if you were an office worker or if you were an educated person and you had a white collar job, you actually dressed up, and they had these big, thick, white snap-on collars that they used to put on the outside of their suit coats, and you'd walk around and you had this white collar. If you were a blue-collar worker, you tended to wear something. Back in the day, they called them dungarees or Levi's or jeans or whatever, and those were blue-collar shirts. So you could tell where, if you were standing around looking at a group of people, you could tell who the white collar people were and who the blue collar people were just by looking at what they wore.
So now, when you say professional trades, give us some examples of professional trades that you're referring to.
Well, right now, I mean, we are really hurting bad for plumbers, electricians, welders, machinists, mechanics, even chefs in restaurants. We're really looking for those types of people, and there's a whole myriad more. That's just a small group. We're looking for drivers, obviously. You know, when Walmart starts paying people $90,000 a year to start driving truck, you know that there's an issue out there. So all of these types of jobs are jobs where you can start in the 50s and work your way up into the six figures in a pretty quick pace, and you just can't find that with some of these other jobs out there.
Now, Ken, obviously, you have a story that led to the book. Talk a little bit about your background and how this book came to be.
Well, you know, quickly, when I was 15, my high school shared a fence with an industrial park. And we used to cut through the fence after school to go to the carryout, and we had to walk through this industrial park. And there was a lot of stuff milling around. There was, you know, guys and gals, and there was dump trucks, and there was, you know, all kinds of construction equipment, stuff that I was interested in. So one day I went in, and I knew someone that worked there, and I said, "Hey, what do you guys do here?" And they say, "Well, we're basically ditch diggers." So I started doing that, you know, because I needed to make money like anybody else when I was 15. So I did that in the summer, and then in the winter times I would work in the office, and pretty soon they had me, after a couple of years of that, they had me traveling the country opening up new franchises for the home office. And then I finally settled in my own in Toledo, Ohio. We started with 6 people, and we now have almost 200, and it's been a heck of a ride.
Now, in your book, you were asked a question, why do you do what you do for a living? And I love the answer, and I want you to talk a little bit about this. The ability to control my time. And there's just such a value of freedom there with that response.
You know, this is a really great point that I think goes unreported when it comes to blue-collar work. When you're working for you're working with your own hands, or you're out controlling your own day, you get to control your input, your output, how quickly you work, the quality of your work. You get to control your time, your schedules, and you also get to control, by and large, your financial gain. And, you know, when you think about the ability to have all that control over your life, it automatically puts in a sense of freedom, a sense of comfort, and a sense of peace into your mindset when you go out on a daily basis. And I just don't think you can get that from a cubicle on the 15th floor of some high rise. So again, you know, all jobs are important. There's no question about it, but you probably can't find one white collar job where that job doesn't begin with a blue collar job having supported them in some way. So obviously that's the world that I live in.
Okay, well, so let's say that a student is wanting to explore the career of a professional trade. What would be their first step that you would tell them to take?
You know, there's a couple good steps. There are some, you know, unfortunately, they took shop class out of high school back in the late 80s, and they replaced those rooms with computers. Now, we all needed to learn computers, I get that, but I always thought, why was that a binary choice, meaning one or the other? Why
Sure.
couldn't we have had both? But there are some great tech schools where you can go in wherever you are. You can find a good tech school where you can literally go into this school and walk from a machine shop, past a carpentry shop, past a welding shop, past a hairdressing shop, past a robotics shop, and you can experience all these things in just a matter of a few days and see what might grab your interest. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to just look at what is in demand in your area, because what's in the highest demand is where the money goes. So, you know, check out what the demand is in your area, and then maybe take on an apprenticeship or go to a tech or a trade school. Certainly a lot cheaper and a lot quicker, and get on your way to earning the life that you want to live.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm talking to Ken Rusk about a great book, Blue Collar Cash, Love Your Work, Secure Your Future, and Find Happiness for Life. Now let's talk a little bit about if you're wired technically for a blue collar job. I mean, how is say a student that's in high school, they probably don't think that they're very good with their hands. They don't really know. I mean, I've always said the first toolbox I ever got was when I married my wife, Sherry. And you don't want me around a hammer or a tool, period. So is that something that you believe that you're born with, that you're able to you have that skill set already, or that's something that's learned? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think first off, there's several different ways that people learn. They call it spatially, they call it tactically, they call it technically. People learn with their hands, they learn with the way they think, or they learn with the way they interact. So I think first off, you need to recognize who you are. And unfortunately, only you knows the answer to that question. So, first off, you kind of have to look at your life and look at how you've lived it. And from the time you were able to walk around your yard, what kind of things interested you? And then you'll learn and try to figure out what kind of person you are. But secondly, every one of these blue-collar jobs has some type of, as I mentioned earlier, some type of a, even welders are using computers now and laser cutters and machining and even carpentry. They have a lot of backup to the technical side for how they estimate lumber and the usage of that. So you can still be involved in a blue-collar trade and not necessarily be skilled with, using a lathe or something like that. And there's just so much interconnection now. Some of the they're calling them, pink collar jobs, where they're kind of a connection between the blue and the white. So there's a place for everybody out there, and Lord knows we need them right now.
So, Ken, you write about in the book the social pressures that young workers feel about a 4-year, going to college for 4 years versus developing a trade or a skill. There's that notion that the only way to be successful is to go to college, but that's just not so true. How do you advise someone who is considering the professional trades to deal with that social pressure?
Well, I look at it this way. I've been very blessed. I've worked very hard, and I've gotten very lucky. And I'm eternally grateful for that, no question about it. But I would tell them that nobody has ever driven up my driveway and seen what I've accomplished, okay, and looked around and said, holy cow, Ken, where'd you go to school? I mean, that's never happened. It's been, how did you grind this life out? So my whole thinking there is, we don't live to work. We work so that we can live. And it's the live thing that people need to begin with. So I always coach people to say, get out a huge poster board, draw what you want your life to look like in enormous detail, colorful, vivid detail. How do you want to live? What type of house or apartment or condo do you want in the suburbs, in the farms area, in the city? What type of transportation do you see yourself having? What type of hobbies do you do? What type of sports do you do? What type of pet do you have? Dog, cat? And if so, what color? What would you name it? Get really deep. What's your give back moment? Get really deep into what you want your life to look like, and then pick one of the many paths that can get you there. We tend to live these if-then lives where if I do all these things, if I get a good grade, get a scholarship, get a college degree, get a good job, then I can live my life. I think that's backwards. I think we start with the then, figure out what that is, and then figure out all the ways that we can go get it.
I want to mention, Ken, and this is something that I really like about the book. Obviously, you go through the thesis of a 4-year college versus a professional trade, but you also give the reader tools and to build a foundation of success going forward within that choice. And I was pleasantly surprised as I opened the book to find the first chapter right out of the gate on a subject that I did not expect to find in the book, and that was the power of the mind. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, if you've ever talked with one of your friends or one of some associate, and they tend to say things like, "Do you see what I mean?" You have friends that I'm sure they'll be telling you a story, and 3 times during the story they'll say, "Do you see what I mean?" Well, what they're doing is they're actually asking you to try to figure out what the picture is that they have in their mind. Do you see what's in my mind? And the reason that's so important is because every entrepreneurial characteristic you can name, persistence, resilience, faith, humility, initiative, any of those characteristics you can name, they all start with and are driven by a vision. Entrepreneurship isn't something that's given to people. People, they say that to me all the time, man, you're lucky you're one of those entrepreneurs. I'm like, no, I just knew what I wanted. I just knew what I wanted my future to look like. And therefore, all those characteristics, they became, awake inside of you. And anybody can do this if they start out with, what do I want my life to look like?
Yeah, you also go through a very in-depth goal-setting exercise in the book, too, which I thought was extremely useful for anybody that is reading the book. Talk a little bit about some of your goal-setting tips.
Well, first off, it's a fact that only about 4% of us have real documented goals. And that's something that right off the bat can separate you from anybody else when it comes to hitting one of your goals or one of your targets. So the first thing I always say is, hey, congratulate yourself. I mean, you're a different person now, and you need to say, I've moved from this someday person to a two-day person where I'm taking action on my life. So take a minute to congratulate yourself, almost like a smoker does when they say, I'm quitting smoking, I'm now a non-smoker, and they kind of celebrate that new person in them. So step one is to do that. Step two is to do what we talked about, get some really clear, super clear goals and visualize what those things are. Step three is where you start to figure out, well, what is the path to getting there? Like, how much is this thing going to cost me? How long will it take me to save up the money for it? If it's a $3,000 thing and I can save $60 a week, I'll have it in a year. If I can save $30 a week, I'll have it in 2 years. No matter what, you're building it with some type of certainty. The fourth step is then to put it into action, and that's real simple. You go to your payroll clerk and you say, look, I want to take $60 a week and I want to put that away where I'll never see it, I can't touch it, and now I know that all I have to do is breathe for the next 52 weeks, and that goal is going to be hit. And then finally, just like working out, or I talk about jumping off the high dive when I was 6 years old, just like any difficult task, you need to share that with someone that you trust, that you love, that will support you, and is just as into your goal as you are, because you're going to need someone to pick you up when you trip and fall or stumble or turn around or need redirected. And that someone is going to be there, very important to help you along the path. So I know I've done about an hour's worth of conversation in just a few minutes, but those are the 5 steps to take to get to any goal, and they are bulletproof. I mean, they will get you there every single time.
Yeah, let me point out, when I say a chapter in the book on goal setting, I mean, there's a lot in this book on goal setting. And to me, it's a bonus to everything he's talking about in the book. And the book is Blue Collar Cash, Love Your Work, Secure Your Future, and Find Happiness for Life. Now, this may be the Captain Obvious question, but I think it's worth pointing out to make sure that people do get the point. You talk about in the book that there's a shortage of blue-collar workers. What does this mean for the opportunity for someone coming out of school?
I just look at it this way. If for every 10 tradespeople that we have today that are retiring, only 5 are backfilling those positions. So right off the bat, we are on our way south, and the pendulum is going to swing way towards the wrong direction when you think about supplying the economy with what we need. So, again, where supply is low and demand is high, that's where the money goes. So I'm a contrarian thinker. Ditch digging was probably number 99 on a list of 100 things I was going to do for a living. I wanted to be a race car driver. But I knew that this could be a means to an end, and I knew that I could control all the things we talked about earlier, and I could create the financing that I needed to then in life invest in other things, grow into other things. And, believe it or not, I have a couple of cars that I race, not professionally, but it's a hobby. So I'm still satisfying that part. So it's just one of those things that you just got to pick it and you got to be committed to it, and really, really great things will happen to you, especially with the undersupply that we have going, because I don't see this changing anytime in the very near, even into the distant future, because, so many kids are getting corralled into college, and we don't build things in the backyard with hammer and nails like tree forts like when we were kids. It's all built on Minecraft on your cell phone. That's not the same experience, and so because of that, we're not discovering the trades as young people, and therefore we're really, really going to suffer when it comes to the supply and demand side of that.
Last point that I want to make about the book is that I don't think very many people realize that the professional trades provide the opportunity for you to be your own boss, and even go the route that you've gone and start a company. And I know plenty of people like yourself, very successful in starting a business, running a business, and that opportunity is there.
Well, I look at it this way. When I started, and I don't consider myself a dinosaur, but when I started, we would take pencils and still use graph paper and long columns to keep our numbers straight in the company. With the way you can do payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and health, and you can do all that stuff on your cell phone now. It's been said that all you need is a pickup truck and a cell phone, and you can run your own company. And in some ways, that's true. I would just say that if you're any good at what you do, and you are willing to get up and strap on your boots and go do what needs to be done, you will be in such high demand, and you're going to get such good money for what you're doing that very quickly you're going to recognize there's enough demand for you to go off and be your own boss and do your own thing and never look back. It's what I did, and I know that it's way easier to do it nowadays than it was back when I started. So whoever's out there listening to that, please don't be afraid to start your own company, because you'll be so glad you did.
Real quick, Ken, and I got about 30 seconds. You talk a little bit about the gender gap and the fact that there's more women getting into the professional trades. I thought that was really interesting. I wanted you to comment on that real quick.
I absolutely love this, because I think that because of the demand that we need for these folks, there is so much opportunity for women to get into these trades. I know several women welders. I know women that have owned their own bakery shops and other things, and electricians. And I just spoke to a plumber the other day whose mother was a plumber. She's a plumber, and now her daughter's going to be a plumber.
That's awesome.
There is so much opportunity now for women to get into these trades. And I heard a guy that owns a welding shop. He said, the gals I have working for me, they're a lot more patient, they're a lot more detailed, and they're really good welders. So I think you'd be welcomed in anywhere, and I would love to see that happen. I'd love to see them move in and swing hammers and do whatever they need to do to make a great living, because it's out there for you.
Once again, Blue Collar Cash, love your work, secure your future, and find happiness for life. Ken, congratulations on your book, and it was a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com. Send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.